It feels like ever since the inception of professional sports, fans have done anything and everything they could to insert themselves into the game. Whether it's showing up to the game in fanatic attire, bringing a giant sign, or even taking some more extreme measures, it's just sort of something that the general public has accepted as part of the madness of being a sports fan. It's pretty crazy when you think about it, full-grown adults filled with a childlike reckless streak simply because they love their sports and their team so damn much. I'm not even talking about the iconic fans who have become synonymous with their franchise, like the Fireman Eds and the Detroit Dons of the world, but even just the average fan. Sports fans are a different breed of human being who, when it comes to sports, operate under a completely different code, which is why there is no shortage of insane fan moments that we have seen over the years, some of which probably cross the line, no matter how epic the moments look when you watch them again. Like the Bengals fan who ran on the field during the middle of the 2005 Cincinnati Bengals game against the Green Bay Packers and had a moment for the ages. NFL Hall of Famer Brett Favre dropped back on a pass play only to have a fan run on the field and pickpocket the quarterback before proceeding to weave down the field on a mad dash for the end zone. Not only did this fan make a sweet snag of the pigskin, but he also pulled off a nasty stiff arm that took out 2 security guards in one fell swoop. He did, however, meet his demise at the hands of one particularly gifted security guard who may or may not have been fielding calls about his availability from a few teams after this tape got around. Even with the hit he took at the end of the clip, I'm pretty sure he is just thanking his lucky stars that it was only a security guard that got his hands on him, and not the likes of someone bigger and professionally trained, which is exactly what happened to this fan who stormed the field during a game between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns. When possible, the last person you would ever want to get their hands on you got a hold of this fan. James Harrison. One swift moment of glory quickly turned into misery when Harrison got his hands on him. At least Harrison showed a bit of mercy and didn't full-on German suplex the fan, even though it looked like he was primed to do so. Obviously, some fans have a hard time controlling themselves once they get their competitive spirits, or some other spirits flowing, and it pretty much never ends up well for them, whether it be fines, bans, or sometimes a proper beat down. But there's one fan from way back in the day, before the NFL stadiums became loaded with a million different cameras and hundreds of members of security staff, who got bold and miraculously got away with his on-field antics. The year was 1961, and it was the second of consecutive matchups between the Dallas Texans and the then Boston Patriots of the AFL at Nickerson Field. Boston had gotten off to a tough start that season, losing 3 of their first 5 games that year, resulting in the firing of second-year head coach Lou Saban. This, by the way, was the beginning of a lifelong trend for Saban, who held 21 different coaching jobs during his 50-year coaching career, earning the nickname of Lou 2.2 Saban for the brevity of his coaching stints. To be fair, the average length of employment for Saban was actually a little bit higher than 2.2 years. In reality, it was an average of a whopping 2.38 years per job for him. But still, the sentiment remains. One more quick note on Saban, since I'm sure you are thinking of a different football coach who, unlike his namesake, has quite the propensity for staying at a job, the Miami Dolphins stint notwithstanding. Yes, Lou is in fact distant cousins with Alabama's legendary head coach, Nick Saban. Anyways, after starting off the season slow, the Patriots started to turn it around under the leadership of Mike Holovac, and they made a run for the AFL East Division title, finishing the season 7-1-1. In the midst of that 9-game stretch, 2 of those games were against Dallas, and both were tightly contested games. The first in Dallas, the Patriots were able to overcome a 17-7 deficit, scoring 11 unanswered points in the fourth quarter to win the game by a final score of 18-17. So needless to say, the Texans were eager for some revenge when they journeyed up north to Nickerson Field the following week for a rematch. But it was the Patriots who struck first, jumping out to a 14-0 lead thanks to their steady passing attack, which actually featured 2 different quarterbacks, Butch Songin and Babe Parilli, completing touchdown passes. Dallas, however, answered with 2 back-to-back touchdowns of their own behind a play of a guy with quite possibly the best early pro football name imaginable, especially considering he played in Dallas. Cotton Davidson, of course. Anyway, he was able to answer the bell, completing a 42-yard touchdown strike to Chris Buford, and then leading the team down the field for a second score right before the end of the first half, which came when Abner Haynes, another great name by the way, punched in a 3-yard run to finish off the drive. The second half was more of the same. The 2 teams traded strikes, including another 40-yard touchdown pass from Cotton Davidson, this time to Bo Dickinson, and on the other side of an epic 91-yard kickoff return for a touchdown from Boston's Ron Burton to take the lead 28-21 heading into the final quarter. The fourth quarter started off as a bit of a stalemate, with both defenses making a couple of stops. But finally, with the game clock starting to run out of time, Dallas got some momentum going. Davison led the Texans all the way down the field and into the red zone, still needing a touchdown to tie the game and force overtime. As time continued to tick off the clock, the Texans made their way inside the 10 and eventually down the 1-yard line. And this is where they found themselves with a 4th and goal to go and time about to expire. One last play to determine whether or not they could extend the game and try to find their way back to a 500 record. Now, to understand what happened next, I have to give you a little bit more context about the Boston Patriots and who they really were back in those days. For starters, they were a far cry from the Brady Belichick Kraft Patriots who have dominated the league for 2 straight decades, not just in terms of performance, but also prestige. Obviously, the entire landscape of professional football was different in those days. There weren't $100 million contracts being thrown around all willy-nilly. In fact, the 1960s Patriots had a team policy which stated that practice could end no later than 2 p.m. so their players could all jet off to their second jobs. Many of them were also car salesmen or insurance brokers or bartenders, anything they could do to supplement their meager football salaries. The Patriots are truly the nomads of the AFL, so much so that they didn't always even print the location of their games on the tickets, because they weren't always entirely sure where they would be able to get field space. It could be at one of the local universities, fields either Harvard, Boston College, or Boston University, usually, and if they were lucky, they could get in at the iconic baseball stadium Fenway Park. It was such a free-for-all that it wasn't even guaranteed that they would play their home games in the New England area. The team's owners, probably testing out other markets, would even stage the home games as far as San Diego or Birmingham, Alabama. And their practice facility was no better. The field was nothing but dirt, and the locker room was tiny, sporting just 6 showers for a team of 30-plus players and a handful of coaches. To make matters worse, it was right next to Logan Airport, and the constant noise coming from the jets that buzzed overhead made directing drills a brutal challenge for the coaches. And when they wanted to study game film, which by the way will come into play later, the Pats would sit on a random collection of buckets and milk boxes in the darkness of the groundskeeper's shed, using a projector and an old white sheet that they would drape across the exposed pipes as a screen. That was if they could get the projector to work, as the roof frequently leaked, causing the projector bulb to burn out. This chaos assisted in cultivating a sort of traveling circus vibe, and as a result, the team and its fans were known for being a particularly scrappy and really rambunctious gang of underdogs. It was not uncommon for fights to break out when the Patriots were on the field, and other teams hated to travel to New England to play them. There was very little about this iteration of the Patriots that resembles the modern-day dynasty that we have all seen dominate the NFL for the past 20 years. Besides, of course, the fact that they would do whatever it took to win, even if it bent or downright violated the rules. Okay, so now that you really have a sense for what the 1960s AFL, and more specifically the 1960s Boston Patriots, were all about, let's get back to the game in question. Dallas has the ball on the 1-yard line with time about to expire, and Cotton Davidson dropped back to pass. He had 2 receivers running crossing routes in the middle of the end zone, and only one of them actually found a nice pocket in the zone. Davidson spotted him and fired it towards the receiver, only to have a blur come across the middle and swat at the pass, tipping it out of the air. And just like that, the Texans' efforts at a comeback were thwarted. The players filed back into their respective locker rooms as they always would. Boston's players hyped up over their 3rd straight victory, and Dallas is licking their wounds as they realized any hopes that they had at making the postseason were all but over. It wasn't until the next day, when the teams were reviewing the film from the game, that they realized what had happened on that final play. If you watch closely, you can see a shadowy figure drift into the picture coming from the back of the end zone. At this time, fans were permitted to purchase standing room tickets, and it was not uncommon for them to line the perimeter of the field. This game may have been part of the reason that they started to phase this out of the game, as one of the fans in this section actually was that blur breaking up the pass.
Watch to the right of your screen as a fan comes on the field to help out the Patriots. Davidson goes back to pass, throws in the end zone, the fan blocks it, it's ruled incomplete, and the Patriots win it.
You can see him squatting low as he meanders onto the field, donning a trench coat before breaking towards the action and making a play on the ball. He then sort of rolls back towards the crowd, further camouflaged by the rest of the fans storming the field. Somehow none of the players seemed to notice, and neither did the officials, and because of the era and the distance between the two teams, even once the interference was realized while they were watching the game tape the next day, There was no way that they were going to redo the play or anything like that. And for who it was, that still remains a mystery. Well, sort of. For years, it was rumored that the fan in question was actually Patriots owner Billy Sullivan, who was commonly spotted in a trench coat similar to the one being worn by the fan in question, but it was never officially confirmed. Either way, whether it was the owner or the team or some random Joe off the streets, the man in the trench coat lived the dream by helping his team secure a victory and actually getting away with it. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time to do that by clicking the subscribe button down below. If you like the video, then like the video. We'd really appreciate it. And last but not least, don't forget to tune into TPS every single day for more cool videos. We'll see you next time.